Welcome to episode 3 of my relationship audio series. I'm extremely excited to be joined this session by my friend and mentor, Jamie Smart. Jamie is the author of the Amazon #1 international best-selling book, Clarity. Welcome, Jamie.
Hey, Ankush, great to be here.
Now, before we jump into the interview, I just want people to know a little bit about who you are for me. Jamie's been, like I said, a friend and a mentor for a few years now. But Jamie and I really kind of connected, about 3 years ago. And I was having an issue at the time, struggling with a relationship. In fact, I was struggling to get over a previous relationship, and I remember I spoke to someone who said I should speak to Jamie. And so I remember one day connecting with Jamie and reached out, and we had a phone conversation, and we spoke for about 20 minutes, and I can't even remember what we spoke about in detail, but I'd been wrestling with this relationship issue for about 2 years. And 20 minutes after having had that conversation with Jamie, the issue just went away. And there was no tricks or techniques or anything, but I just knew I felt a lot better. And so that was the start of me really exploring my journey with Jamie and understanding the principles behind his book. But needless to say, he's definitely changed the direction of my life. So I'm very glad to have you here. Thanks,
Oh,
Jamie.
it's great to be here, man. It's great to be here, and I love hearing about that conversation because it makes me smile. It still amazes me that. And in a way, that conversation was an example of something that I think is really important in any relationship, which is connection. I believe that when it comes to relationship, a felt sense of connection is just an incredibly powerful channel for communication and transformation and just so many of the things that are important to us as human beings. So yeah, great to be here, man.
Thank you. So one thing I wanted to ask was, your book is about clarity of mind and really applying that into the business world. And a number of my guests I've had on here, we've spoken about personal relationships. But I understand these same principles and the connection and relationship that these point to, that can be gained, can also have a huge effect on in business. And I'm really curious as to kind of how you see either the differences or similarities in a business context as well as personal relationships.
Well, it's I mean, one of the first things to realize is that the same person who shows up in their personal relationships also shows up at work. And while the context may be different, relationships are still fundamental to making things happen and getting results and contributing to others. And you'll often find in businesses, in all areas actually, businesses, organizations, all kinds of situations, when things are going wrong, it's often relationships that are at the heart of it. And so, everything from, I think I read some research once that said relationship with the boss was one of the most significant factors when it came to employee motivation, for instance. So relationships are really, really important in all areas of life. So in the business world, collegial relationships, employer-employee relationships, client relationships, supplier relationships, and then all that shows up, everyone, like I say, everyone who's in a business also has personal relationships of one sort or another. And so it seems to me that the principles behind clarity play out in relationships in every aspect of life. And that my kind of starting point for relationships will it may sound a bit out there, but I'll try it on. My assumption is that connection is at the heart of it, and that there's two aspects to connection. There's the felt experience of connection, and there's the reality of connection. So the felt experience of connection is something everyone's had. It's just that feeling of really feeling connected, feeling on the same page, really on the same wavelength, tuned in with another person. And we have different words for it, where it's like being in rapport or being simpatico with someone. And when we have that, we feel it. It's everyone has their own experience of it, but it's just a feeling of really being in sync with a person, really aligned, really in tune, someone you really get on with, you really got a great rapport with. And when you're in that kind of deep identity level kind of rapport and connection with that person, the communication channels are wide open. And so the extreme examples of this are when you can kind of finish someone's sentences, or you're kind of thinking the same thoughts as them. So when I'm working with clients, whether it's doing a coaching session or an intensive, or going in and doing intake with a business client or a team, one of the things I'm looking for is that feeling of connection, because I know when I'm communicating with someone, if we've got that feeling of connection, I'm much more likely to really hear them, and I'm much more likely to be able to really impact them, and vice versa. They're much more likely to hear me, and I'm much more likely to be impacted by them. So that's true for everyone, whether it's a boss wanting their employees to follow their instructions, or whether it's a team member wanting other people in their team to accept their ideas. That feeling of connection is a really powerful communicator. I almost see it as connection is like the conduit that our ideas and our impact can pass through. So if it's wide open and rich and strong and bright, then we can pass a lot of high quality information and impact. And if it's very narrow, like that experience when you're maybe on a date with someone or hanging out with someone, and all of a sudden like someone says something, or you get a thought, does my bum look big in this thought, and all of a sudden the kind of connection's dried up and you don't know what to say and that sort of thing. Well, we've all experienced both ends of that spectrum, and we kind of intuitively know that a deep sense of connection is a really powerful place to come from. Well, so that's the experience of connection, the feeling of connection, you could say. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. So, yeah, it does. I guess what I would ask is there anything that can be done about that? Because I know I've had experiences where I'm connecting with someone very easily and quickly, and other times when I don't connect with people very quickly.
Yeah. Well, okay, so before I get into what can be done about it, I'm going to, I said there's two aspects to it. There's the experience of connection, and there's the reality of connection. So we're just talking about the experience of connection. Now, and that's, a felt experience, that rapport, that simpatico. Now I want to talk about the reality of connection. And the reality of connection is that we're always connected. We're always connected to each other. We're always connected to life, to the world, to the universe, and we're always connected to our deeper self, our spirit, our essence, whatever you want to call that. Because at the level of physics, everything's made of the same energy. Like I read this quote from Lawrence Krauss, who's one of the world's leading physicists, who says that all the molecules that make up our bodies were originally in the midst of stars. They were in the middle of stars that exploded, and that's what we're made of. So we're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of the same energy. So there's a way in which we can experience ourselves as being separate and distinct from one another, and that's very practical when it comes to staying in your own lane when you're driving a car, or knowing whose shoelaces to tie or whose teeth to brush. But at a deeper level of how reality is created, and that the truth of reality is that we're actually one energy taking a variety of forms. Now, this may sound a little woo-woo and a little out there, but it is backed up by modern physics. And knowing that, what we can know is that if you're always connected to everyone, then the only question is, are you more aware of that connection or less aware of that connection? Are you having more of a felt experience of it or less of a felt experience? And here's the interesting thing, Ankush. People will ask, what can I do to have more of that connection? And then the question is sort of, what's the thing I can add in? What's the step, or what's the technique, or what's the move, or what's the thing to remember that I can add into my repertoire that will have me experience more of that connection? But the counterintuitive answer is actually it's something you remove. It's, rather than being additive, it's subtractive. So the only thing that ever gets in the way of us experiencing the reality of our connectedness is what I call the outside-in misunderstanding, the mistaken belief that we're feeling something other than the principle of thought taking form moment to moment. Now here's what I mean by that. We're always living in the feeling of the principle of thought taking form in the moment. But thought is a trickster. Thought makes it seem as though we're feeling something other than our thinking. It makes it seem as though we're feeling our future or our past. We're feeling what someone just said, or what I'm like as a person, or my bank balance, or my dating prospects, or whatever it might be. But the fact is, feeling and thinking are welded together. They're one thing. Our feeling is a perfect moment-to-moment reflection of the totality of our thinking in the moment. Now, when I say our thinking in the moment, I don't just mean the thoughts running through your head. I mean everything that's creating our experiential reality. I'm talking about, when I use the word thought, I'm talking about that which is creating the fabric of our reality, the fabric of our perceptions. And so feeling is telling us about that. It's always telling us about that. It's never telling us about anything else. But sometimes it looks like it is. And when we believe we're feeling something other than our thinking in the moment, we tend to feel a little insecure, we get anxious, our heads fill up with too much thought, too much thinking, and we feel separate from life, we feel separate from other people, we feel alienated. And when we fall out of that superstitious outside-in thinking, we fall back into the moment, we fall back into the present, we fall back into the truth of connection and wholeness and oneness. And that's there for us in any moment. In any moment, we can wake up to the fact that we're living in the feeling of our moment-to-moment thinking, and the moment that happens, we fall back into the present and back into connection. So the thing you can do is get a better understanding of the stuff I was just talking about. Because what I find, and what I know what you've found yourself, is that as your insightful understanding of the principles behind clarity, these principles that are creating our experience of life, as that continues to increase, you experience greater connection, greater peace and love, and greater ability to impact others and communicate effectively. All of that seems to come with the package.
So, what would you say to someone who said, "I understand that," because I get this sometimes when I speak to my clients, is they say, "Yeah, we understand that. We can see that we're feeling or thinking, or that our feelings are a reflection of our thought moment to moment." But don't situations have an impact on how we feel or on what we think?
Well, my experience is that there's no situation where you can make a reliable prediction about what everyone's going to think and feel about it. What we find is that for any circumstance, any situation, there's a variety of thinking that people can have. So something happens, and you've got someone who, I'll give you an example. I was interviewed when the Olympics, this couple of summers ago, when the Olympics were on. Oh, geez, I don't even remember when the Olympics were. Anyway, it was a year or two ago.
2012.
2012. It was 2 years ago. So I was interviewed by Sky because they were talking about the feeling of community and connection and belonging that people were feeling around the Olympics. A lot of people in London were just really feeling just very connected and very much part of a community and really loving it. And the reason they interviewed me was they said that, this is in really stark contrast to what we'd seen the summer before with the London riots and all that sort of stuff. And then everyone's coming together. And what they asked was, is this amazing effect that the Olympics has had, is that gonna stick around? Is that gonna stay? Is it gonna have a lasting effect on this kind of number of people? And I said, well, probably not, because it's not coming from the Olympics. That feeling of connection, that feeling of togetherness, that feeling of belonging is natural for human beings when we fall out of our thinking. But what we also tend to do, we fall out of our thinking, we feel a sense of connection, and then we attribute it to whatever's going on at the time. So whatever was going on at the time in that situation was the Olympics. But it's not caused by the Olympics. That's a trick of the mind. Like magicians, when they're doing magic tricks, there's a concept called misdirection. And magicians use misdirection to get you to look at their left hand while they're doing something with their right hand. So it's to draw your attention away. And thought is the master of misdirection. And thought's almost like a con man. Thought will tell you that your feelings are coming from anywhere but thought. They're always coming from the principle of thought taking form in the moment. But if you ask thought, it'll say, no, it's not coming from me. It's coming from the Olympics, or it's coming from that person you're in a relationship with. That's where it's coming from. No, okay, it's coming from your bank balance or your job. No, okay, it's coming from your childhood, or it's coming from what life's going to be like when you're 70. That's what's doing it. I can give so many examples of this from my own life, where I get tricked by my own thinking into believing that my feelings are coming from somewhere other than thought. And yet, Ankush, the answer is always the same, no exceptions. We're always living in the feeling of the principle of thought taking form, but it constantly or regularly appears as though it's coming from somewhere else. But that's just how thought works. It's how thought works. You know, I was asked by someone, this might be helpful. I was asked by someone the other day I was doing a kind of taster event. And a guy said, well, I get that that's how thought works, but why? Why is it such a trickster? Why is it constantly trying to trick us? That seems really mean and unhelpful. And I said, well, no, it's for the bad times and the good. I said, like, you know, if you think about it, if you go to the movies, like, I love going to the movies. I love movies. There's two things you need to be able to enjoy a movie. First of all, you need to be able to lose yourself in the movie. You need to be able to get swept away by the movie. You need to be able to get involved and engaged with the movie. That's the first thing you need. You have to be able to get engaged with the movie. And then the second thing you need is you need to be able to wake up from it. If you couldn't wake up from it, then every time something bad happened on the screen, you'd call the cops. And every time someone got married on the screen, you'd be ordering gifts for them on Amazon. And every time there was a fire on the screen, you'd be looking around for a bucket of sand or calling the police department. So you need to be able to wake up from the fact that it's a film as well. But if you couldn't get engaged in the film, well, then you'd be sitting through every film just commentating on it and being like a movie critic instead of enjoying it. So you need both of those to be able to have a good experience of a movie. Well, it's the same with life. Thought's creating our experience of life moment to moment. And we need to have, if thought wasn't tricking us, like movies are an illusion, movies are a trick. Similarly, if thought wasn't tricking us, we couldn't have a rich experience of a sunset, or our lover's voice, or a walk in the forest, or looking out of the ocean, or a great victory at something, or we couldn't have those rich experiences if thought wasn't a trickster. If we couldn't get lost in our thinking, if we couldn't get engaged with our thinking, we couldn't have those rich experiences. But by the same token, if we couldn't wake up from those illusions, whatever the angriest or craziest or nuttiest you've ever been in your life, you would still be like that because you wouldn't have woken up from it. So we need both. That there's a beauty in the system when we have both of those. And the more you can see how that oscillation works, how that ebb and flow between getting swept away by our thinking, getting swept away by the reality that thought's creating, and then waking up from that thought-generated reality, then getting swept away with it, then waking up from it. That's the ebb and flow of human experience. And the better you understand that, what I've found is the better you understand that, the deeper your connections, and the more quickly you can wake up when things get a bit nutty.
Now, someone might be listening to this, Jamie, and I know this is not the case, but I'd love to hear you answer this. Is someone might be listening to this and thinking, well, if I'm only feeling my thinking, and it's got nothing to do with the circumstances of the person, doesn't that ruin some of the joy and juice of life? And maybe some of the romance, say, of a relationship, where some people like having a certain experience or a certain person because it looks like it makes them feel a certain way.
Well, it's a great question, and it's one that I often get, because in theory it sounds like that would be the case, but in practice what I find is that the opposite happens, is that people, like my clients, consistently report having deeper, more connected, more loving relationships. But what it does is it almost like makes it safe to throw yourself more fully into it. And it also, but what I have found is that it takes the edge off a lot of the drama in life. Like funnily enough, there are a couple of relationships in my life where there's a certain amount going on at the moment that in the past could have massively spiraled out of control into extreme drama. but because I have an understanding of these principles, I'm not contributing to that, or at least I'm not contributing to it nearly as much as I would have. Nearly as much as I would have. I can still get, caught up in it, but I'm much quicker to wake up, much quicker to be willing to overlook the other person getting caught up in their thinking, much more willing to find, to see another person's point of view, and so it seemed, my experience, Ankush, is that it actually deepens the sense of love and connection and possibility, while kind of taking the edge off a lot of the drama. It's not that I still don't get like spikes of drama and that sort of thing. I'm much quicker to get over them. So I know in theory it might seem like it might take some of the romance out of life, but in practice it seems to make it richer and deeper.
Now I know that as well as business relationships and romantic relationships, you're also the father of two beautiful young girls. How has this understanding changed you as a parent and your relationship with your daughters?
Well, I think one of the ways is the time I spend with them, I really enjoy, and we all enjoy the time we spend together, and so I'm super, super grateful for that. I find that, and I have found that I speak to a lot of parents who they're sometimes kind of distracted when they're with their kids or thinking about work and that sort of thing. And one of the gifts that I've had is when I am with them, I can be really present and really enjoy being with them most of the time. And then when I'm not, if I'm distracted or I'm snappy or whatever, I wake up to it and I can apologize and I can and get back on a good footing with them. So it's really, I mean, I'm not going to be putting in for Parent of the Year awards anytime soon, but I really feel like it's allowed me to just enjoy a deeper and deeper relationship with my daughters, and I'm very grateful for that. I feel like I've got a relationship with them that I never knew I could have before, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I have to echo that. I think my one of the biggest relationships that has shifted since you've introduced me to this understanding has been the relationship with my own family and my parents. And yeah, it's one of those unintended but very positive side effects of learning this. I think it was a quote from Ram Dass said, "If you think you are so enlightened, spend a day with your parents." But I mean, one thing that I found, and again, I'd love your take on it, is there aren't any exceptions to this. And again, I found it for me that, it's not like this impacts certain relationships, but no, my relationship with my parents is, no, that's separate, or this is great, but my relationship with my boss, that's a different case. This seems to be a universal understanding which applies in every relationship.
Yeah, that's my experience. I haven't found any relationships where this doesn't apply, and anywhere where it seems like it doesn't apply is just a place where I haven't seen it clearly enough. And what I find again and again and again, Ankush, is that when I'm running into difficulties in a relationship, it always turns out that the answer, the solution, is much closer to home. Like whenever I think that the problem is the other person, and and I'm agitated about that and that sort of thing, I'm often surprised to discover that it's me that's the problem in that situation, or at least I'm contributing to it in some way. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people in people's lives that are difficult or dangerous or that sort of thing. They often are, but when we wake up to where our experience is coming from, when we wake up to the fact that we're living in the feeling of the principle of thought taking form, we're feeling our moment-to-moment thinking, creating our experiential reality. It sort of clears the decks. It allows us to see what's going on more clearly. And when we fall out of our thinking like that, then we often know exactly what to do. We know what the right thing is to do. We know what matters. And we get clarity. Like you and I bet we would agree that we don't know anyone who gets more intelligent the angrier they get. And yet, everyone I know feels more intelligent the angrier they get. And just waking up to the fact that those feelings are telling you about your thinking and not about the situation or the other person or that sort of thing can be very liberating.
Yeah, no, I love that metaphor about IQ and getting angry, and it's one that's really stuck with me as well. Is there a? It's almost time for us to wrap up, but is there anything that, if there was one thing that you'd want the listeners to take away from, the principles in your book and how it impacts any of their relationships, what would that be?
Yeah, I'm just sitting. I've got all kinds of things that. Here's what I'd like it to be. I'd love everyone listening to this to open. See, here's the thing, Ankush. These days, I experience more connection, more of the experience of connection, the feeling of connection in the average week than I used to in the average year. And when I say the experience of connection, I'm talking about not just with my girlfriend or my daughters, but with my clients, with my friends, with potential clients, with people that I'm on a sales call with. Like that, to me, that was a revelation. It's like, you mean I can be on a sales call and so present and connected with the other person that we're just having a really deep, profound experience as we explore what's possible together. That's a revelation to me, and so I experience more of the feeling of connection, the experience of connection with all the benefits that come with that in the average week than I used to in the average year, and that's purely because in the average year, 10 years ago, I just didn't know what I know now. I was caught up in a misunderstanding about how life works. And so what I'd love people to take away from this as it relates to relationships and connection is open to the possibility that you could be experiencing more connection in the average week than you used to in the average year, regardless of what your circumstances are, regardless of where you're starting from, regardless of what you think you may or may not have going for you or what you may or may not have standing against you. Open to the possibility that you can experience not just more connection in the average week than you used to in the average year, but more peace, more well-being, more clarity, more sense of possibility, and just a richer experience of life. That's there for you. That's there for you. It's an absolute possibility for you. And it's practical and it's real, and that can happen for you. That's what I'd love people to take away from this.
Fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. If anyone wants to find out more, if they want to explore this a bit deeper, how would they be able to do that?
Well, you can get my book Clarity on Amazon. That's the easiest way. You can head over to jamiesmart.com, www.jamiesmart.com. There's tons of free resources and audios and stuff there, as well as details of products and courses. You can find me on Twitter, Jamie_smart_, and Facebook, and all the usual places like that. And, just connect with me and start the exploration. And I suggest to people, don't take my word for this. Explore what I'm pointing to. Check it out in your own life and make up your own mind. And that's the easiest way. Grab the book or go to jamiesmart.com or all the usual places.
Great. And people can find me at uncusjane.co.uk, and you can grab me on Facebook at facebook.com/uncusjaneltd. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Jamie.
Likewise, Ankush.
I'll speak to the listeners next episode. Thanks a lot.